The Essential Drucker by Peter F. Drucker. Picture this: three men standing side by side at a construction site, each one cutting massive blocks of stone. Same job, same tools, same hot sun beating down on them. A curious traveler wanders by and asks the first man, "Hey, what are you doing?" Without even glancing up, the man mutters, "Making a living." The traveler nods and moves to the second man. "And you? What are you doing?" This one straightens up with obvious pride. "I'm the best stonecutter in the entire country." Interesting. The traveler approaches the third man. "What about you? What are you doing?" This man pauses, looks up with a spark of something visionary in his eyes, and says, "I'm building a cathedral." Same task. Three completely different perspectives. Only one of them truly understood the bigger picture. Only one was actually managing his own purpose. This little story captures the entire life's work of one of the 20th century's most brilliant minds, Peter F. Drucker. Never heard of him? That's actually not surprising. He wasn't some flashy Silicon Valley billionaire or celebrity entrepreneur with a reality show. He was a quiet, thoughtful professor and consultant. Born in Vienna in 1909, he lived through nearly the entire century, watching history unfold from a truly unique vantage point. And what's remarkable is that he didn't just observe the world as it was, he saw it as it was becoming. Drucker wrote close to 40 books, translated into dozens of languages. His ideas have fundamentally shaped modern business, leadership, and even the non-profit world in ways that are honestly hard to overstate. He was the first person to tell us that the purpose of a business isn't just making a profit. He foresaw the rise of the knowledge worker, people like you and me, who work primarily with our minds rather than our hands. And he understood, long before anyone else caught on, that the most important person you'll ever manage is yourself. Today, we're diving into his masterwork, The Essential Drucker. This isn't just another business management book. It's essentially a blueprint for understanding the modern world, a guide to finding your place in it, and a manual for building a life of genuine meaning, contribution, and effectiveness. Here's my promise to you. By the end of our time together, you won't just walk away with a few business tactics. You're going to have a completely new lens through which to see your own potential, your future career, and the society you're stepping into. You'll learn the crucial difference between being busy and being effective, between simply having a job and having an actual purpose. You'll learn how to start building your own cathedral. Let's take a quick trip back in time to the 1850s. Imagine a factory, the largest and most profitable of its day. It's a cotton mill in Manchester, England. Inside, nearly 300 people are working away. But here's the weird part. If you looked around for a manager, you wouldn't find one. The owner, a man named Friedrich Engels, yes, Karl Marx's friend, ran it with just charge hands, workers who basically enforced discipline over a few other workers. That world seems completely alien to us now, doesn't it? In less than 150 years, this idea, the concept of management, emerged from nowhere and completely transformed the fabric of our world. It's the invisible force that took us from a world dominated by manual laborers to one dominated by educated knowledge workers. Peter Drucker argues this is the most important and least understood revolution of our time. So what exactly is this thing called management? And more importantly, what's a business actually for? Ask most business people or economists, and they'll give you the obvious answer: an organization to make a profit. Drucker says this answer isn't just wrong, it's actually irrelevant. Think about it like this: profit isn't the purpose of a business, it's the test of its validity. It's like oxygen for the human body. Sure, you need oxygen to live, but living isn't about breathing. Life is about love, growth, contribution. Breathing is just the mechanism that makes it all possible. Profit works the same way for a business. It's absolutely necessary for survival, but it's not why the business exists. Believing that business is all about maximizing profit, Drucker warned, is one of the most dangerous diseases of our society. It fundamentally misunderstands what a business actually does. So if not profit, what is the purpose of a business? Drucker gives us a revolutionary answer that changes everything. There is only one valid definition of business purpose: to create a customer. Let that sink in for a moment. A business isn't there to sell things. It's there to create a customer. Markets aren't created by economic forces or some invisible hand. They're created by business people who spot a need and figure out how to meet it. Sometimes the need is obvious, like hunger during a famine. But often, the need is completely unfelt. Nobody knew they wanted a personal computer until Apple and IBM showed them what it could do. Business action, through innovation, advertising, and salesmanship, actually creates the customer. Once you accept this premise, everything else falls beautifully into place. If the purpose is creating a customer, then a business has only two basic functions. Not accounting, not human resources, not production, just two: marketing and innovation. Now don't get confused here. When Drucker says marketing, he doesn't mean slick advertisements or aggressive selling. In fact, he says true marketing is the complete opposite of selling. Selling starts with your product and tries desperately to find someone to buy it. Marketing starts with the customer. It asks, what do they actually need? What's their reality? What do they value? The aim of marketing, Drucker says, is to know and understand the customer so thoroughly that the product or service fits them perfectly and basically sells itself. It's about making selling almost unnecessary. The second function, innovation, is marketing's partner. It's not enough to just provide goods. A business has to provide better and more economical ones. And innovation isn't just about fancy new technology. It can be a new price point, a new convenience, or a completely new way of satisfying an old want. The salesman who sold refrigerators to Eskimos to keep their food from freezing too solid would be just as much an innovator as someone who invented an entirely new product. It's about endowing resources with new, greater wealth-producing capacity. This simple, powerful idea that a business exists to create a customer through marketing and innovation is the foundation of everything. It forces an organization to look outward, toward the world, instead of inward at its own problems. Because, as Drucker constantly reminds us, the results of any enterprise exist only on the outside. The result of a business is a satisfied customer. The result of a hospital is a healed patient. The result of a school is a student who's actually learned something. Inside an enterprise, there are only costs. This is a genuinely profound shift in perspective, and it leads to a series of crucial questions that every leader, and honestly every employee, absolutely must ask. The first is, what is our business? This seems simple, but it's almost always surprisingly difficult. A steel mill thinks it makes steel. A railroad thinks it runs trains. But is that really their business? Drucker tells this fascinating story about Cadillac during the Great Depression. They were about to go under. The managers thought their business was transportation. But a German mechanic named Nicholas Dreistadt, who eventually took over the company, saw it completely differently. He said Cadillac competes with diamonds and mink coats. The customer isn't buying transportation, they're buying status. That single insight saved the company and turned it into a massive success, even during a depression. To answer, what is our business? You can't look inside. You absolutely must look outside, from the customer's point of view. What want are you satisfying for them? Once you know what your business is, you must then ask, what will our business be, and what should our business be? This forces you to look at the future, at changing trends, technologies, and customer values, and to innovate accordingly. These questions are the first responsibility of top management. Failing to ask them is the single biggest cause of business failure. But understanding the purpose of an organization is only the first step. Drucker then turns his attention to the true engine of any enterprise, the people within it. Management, he insists, is fundamentally about human beings. Its task is to make people capable of joint performance. to make their strengths effective and their weaknesses essentially irrelevant. This brings us to one of his most powerful concepts, the rise of the knowledge worker. For most of human history, the vast majority of people worked with their hands. They were farmers, servants, or blue-collar factory workers. Their work was defined by efficiency, doing things right. But in the 20th century, a completely new kind of worker emerged, someone who works primarily with their mind, with what they have between their ears. This person, quite possibly you, is a knowledge worker, and for a knowledge worker, the job isn't efficiency, but effectiveness. It's not about doing things right, it's about getting the right things done. An engineering department that beautifully designs the wrong product is perfectly efficient and completely useless. This changes everything about how we work and how we're managed. You simply cannot supervise a knowledge worker in detail. They can only be helped. They must direct themselves toward performance and contribution. In a knowledge organization, you're an executive, even if you don't manage a single person. Why? Because by virtue of your knowledge, you're responsible for a contribution that affects the entire organization's ability to get results. The junior chemist in the lab who decides which research line to follow might be making a decision that determines the company's entire future. That person is an executive. The accountant who decides how to classify a product is an executive. The authority of knowledge, Drucker argues, is just as legitimate as the authority of position. But here's the frustrating challenge. The reality of an executive's life is practically designed to make them ineffective. Drucker identifies 4 harsh realities that push every knowledge worker toward futility. First, your time isn't actually your own. It belongs to everybody else. The phone rings, a customer needs you, your boss calls a meeting. You're essentially a captive of the organization. Second, you're constantly forced to keep operating, to deal with the daily crises that rush at you. But these events rarely tell you what's truly important. If you let the flow of events control you, you'll just fritter yourself away. Third, you're only effective when other people actually use your contribution. Your knowledge is useless by itself. It has to be taken by someone else and turned into their output. This means your success depends on people you often have zero control over. Colleagues, superiors, people in completely different departments. And fourth, you live inside an organization. The inside is where you see the problems, the politics, the budget battles. But the results are always outside. The danger is that the inside reality will completely blind you to the outside reality, where the real opportunities and true measures of success actually exist. So what can you possibly do? If the world is designed to make you ineffective, how do you fight back? Drucker says that effectiveness absolutely must be learned. It's not some gift you're born with, it's a habit, a complex of practices that literally anyone can acquire. And it starts not with your tasks, but with the one resource you absolutely cannot get more of, your time. Most people trying to get organized start with a to-do list or an elaborate plan. Drucker says this rarely works. Effective people start by finding out where their time actually goes. This is the first step. Record your time. For a few weeks, keep a detailed log of how you spend every single minute of your day. Don't trust your memory. It will absolutely lie to you. Write it down as it happens. Drucker tells this story of a company chairman who was absolutely certain he spent his time on big-picture strategy and meeting with important customers. His time log revealed he spent most of his day acting like a dispatcher, chasing down small orders that were going through just fine without him. He was genuinely shocked, but the log didn't lie. Once you have the data, the second step is to manage your time. Ask yourself 3 diagnostic questions. 1. What would happen if this task weren't done at all? If the honest answer is nothing, then stop doing it immediately. You'll be amazed at how much of what you do is completely unnecessary. 2. Which of these activities could be done by someone else just as well? The goal isn't just to delegate, it's to free yourself up for the work that only you can do. 3. What do I do that wastes other people's time? Have the courage to actually ask your colleagues this question. You might discover that your helpful meetings are actually keeping everyone from their real work. Drucker also points out organizational time wasters, like recurrent crises that should be turned into routines, overstaffing where people just get in each other's way, and an excess of meetings, which he brilliantly calls a concession to deficient organization. The final step is to consolidate your time. Knowledge work genuinely requires large chunks of uninterrupted time. Writing a report in 15-minute bursts, scattered over 3 weeks, is basically useless. You need to carve out solid hours at a time. Find what actually works for you, maybe working from home 1 day a week, or scheduling all your meetings on 2 days and leaving the other 3 free for deep work. Know thy time, Drucker says, and you are well on the road to effectiveness. But managing your time is just the beginning. The truly effective person then asks a much deeper question. This is the absolute heart of Drucker's philosophy for the individual. He doesn't ask, "What do I want to do?" He asks, "What can I contribute?" This question fundamentally shifts your focus from your own efforts to the results of the whole organization. It moves you from being a subordinate, no matter your title, to being part of top management. The person who says, "I run the accounting department," is a subordinate. The person who says, "It's my job to give our managers the information they need to make the right decisions," is a leader. Focusing on contribution forces you to think about what the organization needs from you, what your colleagues need from you, and what results you're actually responsible for. It makes your relationships genuinely productive, because they become focused on a shared task, not just pleasantries. It fuels your self-development, because to make a bigger contribution you have to ask yourself, what skills do I need to acquire? What strengths do I need to improve? And it develops others, because you set a high standard based not on your personality, but on the demands of the task. People, Drucker observed, adjust to the level of the demands made on them. He tells this beautiful story about a hospital where a long-retired nurse named Nurse Bryan had left an incredible legacy. She wasn't a supervisor, just a regular floor nurse. But whenever a decision came up about a patient, she would always ask, "Are we doing the absolute best we can to help this patient?" Years after she was gone, her rule, Nurse Bryan's rule, still echoed through the hospital. In meetings, people would stop and ask, "Would this have satisfied Nurse Bryan?" And it would force them to aim higher, to do better. That's the genuine power of focusing on contribution. To make your greatest contribution, however, you need profound self-knowledge. This is where Drucker's advice becomes deeply personal. He says that to manage yourself, you absolutely must know the answers to 3 questions. 1. What are my strengths? Most people think they know, but they're usually completely wrong. There's only one reliable way to find out: feedback analysis. Here's how it works. Whenever you make a key decision or take a key action, write down what you expect will happen. 9 or 12 months later, compare the actual results to your expectations. Do this consistently for a couple of years, and a clear pattern will emerge. You'll discover your true strengths, the things you consistently do well. You'll also discover where you're genuinely incompetent, and the bad habits that are holding you back. The conclusions are simple but incredibly powerful. First, concentrate on your strengths. Put yourself in positions where you can actually use them. Second, work on improving your strengths even further. And third, waste as little effort as possible on improving areas of low competence. It takes far more energy to go from incompetent to mediocre than it does to go from first-rate to genuinely excellent. 2. How do I perform? This might be even more important than knowing your strengths. Are you a reader or a listener? Drucker points out that very few people are both. President Eisenhower was a reader. He needed written reports to make a decision. President Kennedy was a listener. He needed to hear people talk things through. If you're a listener trying to work like a reader, you'll be completely ineffective. How do you learn? Do you learn by writing things down, like Beethoven, who filled notebooks he never looked at again? Do you learn by hearing yourself talk? Do you learn by doing? School assumes there's one way to learn, but that's simply not true. Find your way and act on it. Do you work well with people, or are you fundamentally a loner? Do you perform best under stress or in a predictable environment? Are you a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big one? And crucially, are you a decision maker or an advisor? A great number 2 often fails spectacularly when promoted to the top spot because they're a brilliant advisor but cannot handle the pressure of making the final decision. The key is not to try to change yourself fundamentally. It's to work hard to improve the way you already perform and to avoid situations where your way of performing sets you up for inevitable failure. 3. What are my values? This is the ultimate test. To be effective long-term, your values must be compatible with your organization's values. They don't have to be identical, but they must be able to coexist. Sometimes, there's a painful conflict between your strengths and your values. You might be exceptionally good at something that you don't believe in, that doesn't feel like a worthy contribution. Drucker shares his own personal story. As a young man in the 1930s, he was a successful investment banker in London. It fit his strengths perfectly. But he realized that managing assets wasn't aligned with his values. "People were my values," he wrote, "and I saw no point in being the richest man in the cemetery." So he quit, with no job and no prospects, and completely changed his life. It was absolutely the right thing to do. Knowing your strengths, how you perform, and your values allows you to answer the final question, where do I belong? Successful careers, Drucker concludes, are rarely planned in advance. They belong to people who are prepared for opportunity because they genuinely know themselves. This self-knowledge can turn ordinary, competent people into outstanding performers. Once you understand yourself and how to be effective, you can then tackle the most critical task of any executive, making effective decisions. Drucker's approach to decision-making is, like everything else, deceptively simple and profound. Effective people, he noticed, don't make hundreds of decisions. They concentrate on the few genuinely important ones. They're not impressed by speed. They're impressed by soundness. He breaks the process down into key elements. First, you must ask, is this a generic situation or an exception? A generic problem needs a rule, a principle. An exceptional problem needs to be handled as a unique event. The most common mistake managers make is treating a generic situation as a series of unique events, constantly fixing leaks instead of redesigning the faulty pipe. Second, you must define the specifications of the decision. What are the boundary conditions? What minimum goals must the decision absolutely achieve? A decision that doesn't satisfy these conditions is actually worse than useless. This is what went catastrophically wrong with President Kennedy's Bay of Pigs decision. The two specifications, overthrow Castro, but make it look like the U.S. wasn't involved, were fundamentally incompatible. It was a prayer for a miracle, not an actual decision. Third, start with what is right, not what seems acceptable. You'll always have to compromise eventually. But if you don't know what right looks like, you can't tell the difference between a good compromise and a terrible one. As Alfred Sloan told Drucker, "You tell us what's right. Don't worry about our reaction. We know how to make the compromises. But we can't make the right compromise unless you first tell us what right is." There's a massive difference between half a loaf of bread, which is still food, and half a baby, which is a corpse. Fourth, build action directly into the decision. A decision without a concrete action plan is just a good intention. Who has to do what, when, and how? Unless it becomes someone's specific work assignment, nothing has actually been decided. And finally, build in feedback. A decision is essentially a hypothesis. It must be tested against reality. This is why military commanders don't just rely on reports. They go and see for themselves. They know that to truly understand the situation, you have to get out of the office and actually look. But perhaps the most counterintuitive part of Drucker's entire process is his insistence on disagreement. Most books say, first, find the facts. Drucker says this is actually impossible. You don't start with facts. You start with opinions. Facts only exist once you have a criterion for relevance, which is itself an opinion. People who look for facts first will just find the facts that fit the conclusion they've already reached. The effective decision maker knows this, so he doesn't look for consensus. He actively encourages opinions. but he insists that they be rigorously tested. He asks, what would we have to see to prove this hypothesis is correct? And most importantly, he deliberately organizes disagreement. Alfred Sloan once famously said in a meeting, "Gentlemen, I take it we are all in complete agreement on the decision here." When everyone nodded, he continued, "Then I propose we postpone further discussion to give ourselves time to develop disagreement and perhaps gain some understanding of what the decision is all about." Disagreement is crucial for 3 reasons. First, it's the only real safeguard against the decision-maker becoming a prisoner of the organization, surrounded by people telling him what he wants to hear. Second, it provides alternatives. A decision without an alternative is essentially a gambler's throw. And third, disagreement stimulates the imagination. It forces you to see the problem from entirely new angles and find truly creative solutions. So the effective person doesn't waste time asking who's right and who's wrong. They ask, why do we disagree? They know that the person who sees things differently is probably looking at a different reality and is concerned with a different problem. Understanding that is the key to a genuinely sound decision. This focus on contribution, on self-knowledge, on time, and on decision-making forms the core of Drucker's vision for the individual. But he then zooms out to look at how these effective individuals can create something genuinely new in the world. This is the realm of innovation and entrepreneurship. For Drucker, entrepreneurship isn't some mysterious, romantic flash of genius. He dismisses that idea completely. Such flashes are rare, and they almost never turn into real innovations. Innovation, he insists, is work. It's a discipline. And it can absolutely be learned and practiced. It starts with a systematic analysis of 7 sources of innovative opportunity. The unexpected success or failure. Incongruities between what is and what ought to be. Process needs. Changes in industry or market structure. Changes in demographics. Changes in perception, meaning, and mood. And finally, new knowledge. All of these sources should be constantly monitored, but once you have an idea, there are clear principles, the do's and don'ts of innovation. The do's are straightforward. 1. Analyze the opportunities systematically. Don't just wait around for inspiration. 2. Go out and look, ask, listen. Innovation is both conceptual and perceptual. You need to look at figures, but you also need to look at actual people. 3. Keep it simple and focused. An innovation should do one thing exceptionally well. If it's complicated, it will break. 4. Start small. Don't aim to revolutionize an entire industry overnight. A small, tentative start allows you to learn and make crucial adjustments. 5. Aim at leadership. Even if the market is small, the innovation must aim to be the absolute best, to establish a unique position. The don'ts are equally important. 1. Don't try to be clever. Innovations have to be used by ordinary people. Simplicity wins. 2. Don't diversify or splinter your efforts. Stay focused on a core area, whether it's a technology or, even better, market knowledge. 3. Don't innovate for the future. Innovate for the present. An innovation must have an immediate application. The future is just a bonus. Successful innovators, Drucker concludes, aren't actually risk-takers. They're fundamentally conservative. They aren't risk-focused. They're opportunity-focused. They systematically define the risks and try their hardest to minimize them. With this understanding, Drucker lays out 4 distinct entrepreneurial strategies. The first is being fastest with the mostest. This is the high-stakes gamble to completely dominate a new market or industry from the very start. Think of DuPont with nylon. They invented a completely new material, and then threw massive resources into plants, advertising, and market creation to basically build the plastics industry. It's a moonshot. If it hits, the rewards are immense. If it misses, it's gone forever. The second strategy is creative imitation. This seems like a contradiction, but it's genuinely brilliant. The creative imitator lets someone else pioneer the new product, but then comes in and perfects it, positions it better, and understands the market for it better than the original inventor. IBM did this brilliantly with the computer. The first computer, the ENIAC, was built at a university for scientific work. IBM saw its potential for business, adapted the design, and within just a few years they owned the market. The creative imitator looks at the new thing from the customer's point of view and serves a demand the pioneer created but isn't adequately supplying. The third strategy is entrepreneurial judo. This is the art of using the size and bad habits of established leaders against them. When the transistor was invented, the big American electronics companies basically ignored it. It wasn't invented here, and it seemed low quality compared to their beautiful vacuum tubes. A small, virtually unknown Japanese company called Sony bought the license for a tiny sum, put the transistor in a cheap portable radio, and conquered the world market. Entrepreneurial judo finds a beachhead the big players aren't defending, the low end of the market, the customer who's being ignored, and uses it to build a dominant position. The final strategy is finding an ecological niche. This isn't about dominance, but control. It's about finding a small, essential part of a process and becoming the only supplier, effectively a practical monopoly. This could be a toll gate position, like a company that makes a crucial enzyme for cataract surgery, a specialty skill position, like the company that makes all the electrical systems for cars, or a specialty market position, like the companies that know every baker in the world and supply all their ovens. These businesses are often completely anonymous, but highly profitable and remarkably safe from competition. All of these strategies require a deep understanding of the customer and the market. But as Drucker looks to the future, he sees these principles applying not just to business, but to society itself. We're living through another great social transformation, he says, as profound as the Industrial Revolution. We've moved from a society of farmers and domestic servants to a society of blue-collar workers, and now to a knowledge society. In this new society, knowledge is the key resource, and knowledge workers are its leading class. This has massive implications. Education becomes the central institution of society, and competition becomes global and universal, because knowledge is universally accessible. There are no poor countries anymore, only ignorant ones. This knowledge society is also fundamentally a society of organizations. The individual knowledge worker is only effective as a member of an organization, which can convert their specialized knowledge into actual performance. But this creates an entirely new kind of employee. The knowledge worker owns the means of production, their own knowledge, they're mobile. They need the organization, but the organization needs them even more. And in this new world, one of the greatest challenges and opportunities is something completely new in human history: the need to manage the second half of your life. For the first time ever, individuals can realistically expect to outlive organizations. A 50-year working life is becoming the norm. But doing the exact same work for 50 years is simply too long for most people. They get bored, they stagnate, they essentially retire on the job. The midlife crisis of the executive, Drucker says, is mostly just profound boredom. So what do? Drucker offers 3 practical answers. First, you can start a completely different career. The business controller moves to a hospital. The lawyer who's made her fortune starts a nonprofit to build model schools. Second, you can develop a parallel career. You stay in your main job, but you start a second significant activity, often in the nonprofit sector, that takes another 10 or 15 hours a week and gives you a new challenge and a new community. Third, you can become a social entrepreneur. You keep doing your main work, but you pour your energy into starting a new venture that addresses a genuine social need. The key to all of this is to start early. You don't wait until you're 60 to start volunteering or exploring a new field. You build these second interests in your 30s and 40s, so they're ready and waiting when you need them. A second major interest is also your greatest protection against the inevitable setbacks of life, being passed over for a promotion or a personal tragedy. It gives you a sphere where you can still contribute, make a real difference, and be somebody. This is genuinely a revolution in human affairs. It demands that every knowledge worker think and behave like the chief executive officer of their own life. And this leads to Drucker's final, grand vision. In this new knowledge society, where old communities, like the family and the village, have lost their traditional integrating power, we desperately need something to hold us together. Government can't do it. It's proven fundamentally incompetent at running social services. The workplace can't do it. It's a tool, not a total community. The answer, Drucker says, lies in a new, autonomous social sector. This third sector of nonprofit volunteer organizations is where the real social work actually gets done. In the United States, organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, the Salvation Army, and countless church-run schools are achieving the successes that massive government programs have consistently failed to produce. But more than that, this sector is where we can restore genuine citizenship. In the massive modern state, the individual citizen feels completely powerless. All you can really do is vote and pay taxes. But as a volunteer in a social sector organization, you can make a real difference. This is where we find community, commitment, and contribution. This finally brings us to the new definition of an educated person. In the past, the educated person was essentially an ornament, a humanist who knew the classics but stood deliberately apart from the world of work. But in the knowledge society, the educated person is at the very center. The new educated person cannot be just a narrow specialist, nor can they be just a liberal arts generalist who scorns the world of practice. They must be prepared to live comfortably in two cultures at once, the culture of the intellectual, who focuses on words and ideas, and the culture of the manager, who focuses on people and actual work. They must be a citizen of the world, able to genuinely appreciate cultures beyond the West, but they must also be deeply rooted in their own traditions. They must understand the different knowledges. What is economics fundamentally about? What is geology trying to do? Not to become an expert in everything, but to create a shared universe of discourse that holds our increasingly fragmented world together. The entire worldview is shifting. For 300 years, since the invention of the steam engine, we've lived in a mechanical universe, one that could be understood through analysis, by taking it apart into its pieces. But the computer, while the ultimate product of that analytical age, has actually pushed us into a completely new one. Information is the organizing principle of biology, not mechanics. A biological system is a whole, fundamentally different from the sum of its parts. It requires not just analysis, but perception. We're learning to see patterns, configurations, and wholes. We're moving from Descartes' famous "I think, therefore I am," to a new understanding, "I see, therefore I am." The future is genuinely uncertain, but Drucker gives us the tools to navigate it. The challenges are enormous, but they're not tasks for governments to solve alone. They're tasks for individuals, for managers and professionals in their own organizations and in their own lives. It all comes back to that third stone cutter, to see the cathedral you're building, to take responsibility for the whole, to focus on your contribution, and to build a life of genuine purpose, effectiveness, and meaning in a world of constant change. As we close the pages of the Essential Drucker, it's honestly hard to believe when these ideas were originally written. Some of them date back to the 1950s and 60s, yet they feel as if they were written specifically for our world today, a world of global networks, startup culture, and constant, dizzying change. That's the mark of a truly timeless thinker. Peter Drucker wasn't just observing the present, he was seeing the deep currents of history that were actively shaping the future. What I find most powerful about Drucker's work is its profound humanity. In a field that can so often be reduced to numbers, spreadsheets, and cold, hard strategy, Drucker always brings it back to people. He reminds us that an organization is nothing more than a community of human beings working together. Its purpose isn't to make money, but to serve genuine human needs. Its greatest resource isn't capital, but the knowledge, skill, and commitment of its people. The single most transformative idea in this entire book, for me personally, is that simple question: what can I contribute? It's a question that can genuinely change not just your career but your entire life. It shifts your mindset from one of entitlement, what can I get, to one of responsibility, what can I give? It forces you to look beyond your own small world and see yourself as part of a much larger whole. It's the question that turns a job into a mission and a stonecutter into a cathedral builder. If there's one thing I genuinely hope you take away from our time together today, it's this empowering idea that effectiveness is fundamentally a choice. It's not some talent you're born with. It's a set of practices that literally anyone can learn. You can learn to manage your time effectively. You can learn to identify your true strengths. You can learn to make sound decisions. You can learn to focus on contribution. These aren't grand, abstract theories. They're practical, learnable skills. So how can you start putting these ideas into practice right now? Let me offer 3 simple actions you can take today. First, start your feedback analysis. The next time you begin a significant project or make an important decision, take just 2 minutes to write down what you honestly expect the outcome to be. Put it in a sealed envelope or a private digital note. Then, in 6 or 9 months, open it up and compare reality to your expectations. This simple act of self-reflection is the fastest path I know to discovering your true strengths. Second, the next time you're given an assignment, ask the contribution question. Before you dive into the how, stop and ask why. What is the one contribution I can make in this project that will have the greatest impact on the overall goal? Frame your entire work around that answer. And third, track your time for just 3 days. Don't try to change anything yet, just observe honestly. Use a simple notebook or a notes app and be brutally honest with yourself. Where does your time really go? The awareness you gain from this simple exercise will be the first and most critical step toward taking genuine control of your most precious resource. Peter Drucker has given us more than just a management textbook. He's given us a complete philosophy for living in the modern world. A world where you are essentially the CEO of your own life, responsible for your own growth, your own career, and your own contribution. It's a world that demands more of us than ever before, but it also offers more opportunity for meaning, for purpose, and for genuine impact. That was our journey through The Essential Drucker by Peter Drucker. We've touched on some of the highest peaks of his wisdom today, but I have to be completely honest with you. A summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the layout, point out the landmarks, but it can never replace the actual experience of walking the trails yourself. The real magic of this book happens in those quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map. It's designed to help you decide if this is a journey you genuinely want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your work, and your world. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas that have shaped the world's most successful people, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.